Welcome to this second part of our lesson on the topic of Augustine as a teacher and as a student. The first part of this video was, or rather of this lesson, was all about a glimpse into the life of Augustine as a student. And I already mentioned to you the various levels of education during the time of Augustine. Now this time in this video, we will be talking about Augustine's possible experience and take a glimpse of what happened when he started teaching. So after his studies in Carthage in about 374, Augustine went back to his hometown, Tagaste, and there he taught as a teacher of grammar or as grammaticus, as we have already explored. So more or less, we can say that he was a high school teacher at the time. And there again, Romanianos, the rich man who helped him pursue his higher studies in Carthage, supported him by establishing a school in Tagaste. And that is actually the motivation of Romanianos why he helped Augustine study in Carthage, but because Romanianos was interested in helping the men, because it was only the men who were educated in a formal way in Tagaste through the assistance of this high school teacher, Grammaticus Augustine. Now, note, Romanianos as a wealthy person is already exercising or practicing what we call a social responsibility. He served as a benefactor of a certain talented man, and then, of course, it is expected that these men who were educated or helped by rich, wealthy patrons or benefactors will in turn help their fellow men or their country mates or town mates or whatever the case is. This is a very good element we have to remember, that we have our social responsibility to the next generation. What we learn, what we acquire, is not to enrich ourselves, it is not to benefit only us, but it's to benefit others. Unfortunately, nowadays, that value of social responsibility and at the same time social accountability is no longer existing, or it might exist but only with some, but not all. And that is sad. I think one of the things that as teachers we need to inculcate in our students is that they are blessed by the Lord God for those who are faithful, or they benefit from the state, the government, in the form of scholarships or whatever you have there, not for their own benefit but also to share this with other people. Sometimes it's sad that many of our learned men and women who are scholars of the state through the state education would often work and go abroad and work there and forget about the Philippines. So I don't know. But here, you can see here, Romanianos, the patron of Augustine, the benefactor of Augustine, after Augustine finished his education and Augustine went back to Tagaste, his hometown, Romanianos now utilized Augustine's talents as a orator, as a rhetoric teacher, to help the young men in Tagaste as a grammaticus, that's a secondary or high school teacher. However, men of great learning are also men of great aspirations and hopes. So, Tagaste is a very small pond to a very big fish. That is Augustine. Augustine would not fit into just being merely a high school teacher or a grammaticus in Tagaste. And his desires, his dreams, moved him to go back to Carthage and create his own school there. One of the pupils of Augustine, and also who became his friend, was Alypius. Alypius at the time was a lawyer working in the local court, and he studied with Augustine in order to improve his oratorical skills. And Alypius became a very good friend. Now, in Carthage, as a teacher, Augustine was also disappointed with his job, and many of our teachers are also disappointed with their own jobs. No? And what is the cause of Augustine's disappointment? It was because of a rebellious group of students that are called as the Eversores, according to the book that I'm reading. And here, Augustine described them as devils. Sometimes when we have students who are so rude and troublesome, at the back of our minds we are calling them devils. But here Augustine really compared them to devils in the Confessions, because when they enter the school, they do it without any permission. And then what is bad here is that took away students with them, and teachers cannot do anything because the group was very violent, and the local authorities are not able to control them. So he lived in Carthage for almost 8 years, accompanied by his mother and his son Deodatus. But then again, Carthage now became a very small pond for this ever-growing fish called Augustine. So, even Carthage cannot contain the growing ambitions of Augustine. And where else can he go? He has to go to Rome, the biggest pond at the time. And that is the capital of the Roman Empire, as we know it. And during the time of Augustine, Rome was still in its splendor. It was only later on that Rome was devastated and the capital was moved to Constantinople, or nowadays we call it as Istanbul, in Turkey, or Asia Minor at the time. Here in Rome, by the time that Augustine moved to Rome, he was already about 29 years old, and he transferred there. Monica, his mother, at the start did not want to go to Rome because she knows that there is so much goodness in Rome, but there is also so much evil there. And maybe as a mother, she doesn't want Augustine to be corrupted further. Pasensya na kayo for some background noises, because we cannot otherwise, we don't have any choice otherwise, no, but to bear with the inconvenience of background noises of children, of people hammering something, or of the buses passing by. Okay, let's move on. There in Rome, Augustine opened a school of rhetoric and grammar. So we can say that Augustine opened a school that has a high school and university education levels. So medyo nagdako na. Here in Carthage, here in Rome, there are no Eversores, just like in Carthage, wala na. But unfortunately, there's still a problem. Everywhere you go, education and its system will always find problems. So what's the problem that Augustine encountered in Rome? Well, students who are not interested at all in education. First, you have to take note that Rome is a very educated, students in Rome are jaded in some sense. It's so hard to impress them. After all, the best and the brightest of the teachers are gathered in Rome. They are in Rome. So when you go to school, it's not so much that you have to look for the best, but you have to look for who is the best among the best. And sometimes when you are surrounded with so much brightness and splendor, you become jaded. In other words, you lost interest and you are more concerned of the company of friends rather than of learning. And that is the problem of Augustine now. His students, unlike in Carthage, they are very educated. But at the end of the course, they would not pay their tuition fee. So they would just listen to Augustine, enjoy the company of their classmates, but in the end, they would just disappear without paying Augustine the due as teacher. Walang tuition fee, hindi nagbabayad ng mga estudyante. And of course, this is a very, what do you call this one? Very bad effect on Augustine because he has to, in a way, live in a very, not really miserable, but in a economically challenged situation, to be more politically correct. Here in Rome, you can see that he was positioned also, but in Rome, there is another city. I mean, when Augustine was in Rome, there is another city that rivals Rome, and that is Milan. And when Rome became too much for Augustine to bear, he worked also in Milan. And there in Milan, he was recognized as a speaker of the royal court. And if you have seen the movie Restless Heart, which I gave you to view at the beginning of this course with me, you can see here it portrayed Augustine as an orator in the court of Milan, where the emperor resides. And the emperor at the time was Valentinian II. And also in Milan, that Augustine became acquainted with Ambrose, Saint Ambrose, the bishop of Milan at the time. Ambrose was considered one of the refined and educated men during that time. And Augustine was intrigued by Ambrose, that he started to attend the sermons or listen to the sermons of Ambrose, not to learn, but to assess the talents of Ambrose. You know, men of talents would assess each other. Taksanay, in other words. So, ano gikaalam na siya, be? Pamatian ta. Tanawon tagid, be? Alam gina siya. And sometimes we also do that. Maybe some of us are also guilty of that. And we would only give our respect to those who can convince us. And most often, we don't give our respect to others because we are only convinced that we are alone, are the brightest in the class, for example, or in the community. You know, we become so proud of ourselves, of our learnings, and everybody else is under us. We underestimate them. Okay, so Augustine would want to see whether it's true that Ambrose is one of the most learned, if not the most learned man in Milan. But of course, he is not with the emperor because he is a Christian, or rather he was a Christian. So Augustine started to listen to the preachings of Ambrose, to assess the skills and the knowledge of Ambrose. But later on, as he continued to listen to Ambrose, slowly, bit by bit, Augustine was becoming convinced of the truths of Christianity. And in fact, this is the seed which started the conversion of Augustine. As a teacher in Milan, Augustine taught the children of the most important and the richest persons in the courts of the emperor. So this time, Augustine has no financial problems anymore. Unlike in Carthage, where and Rome, where the students are so boisterous or they are not paying at all. This time, he's teaching now the richest and the most important children of the most important and the richest people or persons in the court of the emperor. And sometimes during important occasions in the imperial court, Augustine will deliver speeches. And I think you can see that in the movie Restless Heart. If you have not seen the movie in its entirety, I suggest that you watch it. It's a little bit long, and you can watch it part by part. So there's no need for you to sit down for the 3 hour. I think it was a 3 hour movie, but you can look at it in parts, and to give us also a kind of a glimpse into the life of Augustine, the Confessions as a whole, of course, being cautioned that there are some artistic license there. Here, whenever he delivered his speeches, particularly in the front of the emperor in his court, he was acclaimed as one of the best orators at the time, if not the best orator. But here, as Augustine wrote in the Confessions, there is that knowing dissatisfaction in the heart of Augustine. He was looking for something more. He has already reached the highest position that a teacher can achieve. He is now the official speaker of the royal court, and that is the highest that you can aspire in your life as a teacher. But still he was unhappy. Why is he unhappy? Well, of course we know the answer. Because the heart was made by God for himself. And that is very true in the life of Augustine. His heart is yearning for more. But what is that more? He has already the best, the highest possible position he can acquire as a teacher. But what is that dissatisfaction and unhappiness in his heart? Of course, that is the search for something greater than whatever the world can give. And of course, we know the answer. Looking back, we know the answer. But the question, I think, is, we already know the answer, but do we feel that dissatisfaction and that longing for God? Don't know. So you may answer that as a kind of a personal reflection. You don't need to post your answer or comments. Okay, so here, in Milan, it was in Milan that Augustine again encountered a saintly man, Simplicianus. So we have Ambrose in Milan, and then we also have Simplicianus in Milan, which happens to be also a saint in the early church. Here, together with the stories about Saint Anthony, the abbot, and the monks that left everything to follow Christ, this led him gradually to be transformed. And the next scene, of course, we know that in the garden in Milan, Augustine heard the voice inviting him, tolle legge, tolle legge, tolle legge, take and read, which after Augustine opened the scriptures to the particular part wherein he was now really convinced that the Lord God is talking to him. And it marks the stage, the final stage in the journey of conversion of Augustine. So, at this point, I think we can say, and look back to what we have discussed, that our life, as long as we are opening ourselves to the guidance of the Spirit, our life is supposedly a gradual unfolding of of God's presence in our lives. So it's a gradual unfolding of the presence of God in our lives. That is if we believe in God. Or that is if we don't take for granted God and that we are searching. So here, the desire of the heart is very clear. The ambitions of Augustine, from a small town of Tagaste to a greater town of Carthage to the greatest city of Rome and Milan also, to the imperial city of Milan. The desires of Augustine and his motivation led him from one city to another, from one position to another. But looking back with the eyes of faith, Augustine realized that these movements, these transitions, is actually building on each other so that he will become nearer to God. In fact, it was in Milan that he met the Saint Ambrose, or rather the saintly Bishop Ambrose, and the saintly man named Simplicianus. And there, the process, the journey of conversion was made complete. So you can see here, conversion is not a one-shot deal. Sometimes we have this idea that conversion is a dramatic, it should always be dramatic. Okay, in some sense, sometimes the climax of the conversion process will always be climatic. But the point is, it is gradual, it is a process. Another significant point that we can look into the life of Augustine as a teacher is that problems will always be with us. There will always be problems in the educative process, not only on the part of the teachers, but on the part of students. But I think the great question, the great crux there of the matter is Augustine in each city, from among his students, who became later his colleagues, he struck a friendship with them. Not all students became his friends, I think. But they did not become his enemies also, I think. But there are some significant men who became part of the life of Augustine. Significant students who became part of the life of Augustine in his later years, or maybe after they graduate maybe, or after they finish studying with Augustine, they remained as friends. And one of those, as already mentioned, was Alypius. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Alypius also became part of the first monastery or community of disciples that Augustine formed, if I'm not mistaken. But Alypius, I can still remember, because when I was in high school, I studied also in an Augustinian school, and the name Alypius would always be mentioned together with Augustine as one of his friends. So you see, I think that is true also for us teachers. We may be concerned with the transmission of knowledge, that's true. We may be concerned, and we should be concerned with the transmission of values, but we should also be friends with our students in some sense, no? Without murking the demarcations and the boundaries of propriety and decency. Unfortunately, I think this is a very unfortunate development. Many of us are already convinced that we should be friends with our students. Correct. Some of us would even go to outings with our students, go to drinking sessions with our students, because we become so friendly with them. Become, friends tayo. Well, I don't know the policies and the protocols of your own schools and universities. It may have its pros and cons. When a teacher is too familiar with the student. You may agree or disagree with my point of view, but my point of view is this. Yes, we should develop friendship with our students. We should make ourselves part of their lives. But we should maintain our dignity as teachers. Kasi minsan, what happened is, kita mismo, we allow ourselves to be too friendly with our students. But the question is, not all our students. Sometimes it's only a select few. So if you want to be friendly, if you want to be, you want to make yourself as a very good teacher, and not only as a authority, but a relating teacher, a compassionate teacher. Then you make it true to everyone. So my concern is this: why is it that some, only some? Not Father, masaya mo nga. Father, because those are the only things that, those are the only people that would go with us or have time. Okay. So whatever your point of view, I respect it, and it's not really a matter of argument, pero amo lang siya, I think. We have to maintain the boundary of propriety and decency. But while we are trying to maintain the boundaries of propriety and decency, it should not hinder us from making our students love us. Ganon, no? Or rather, it should not hinder us from allowing our students to experience something more. It's not only a formation of the mind, but it's also a formation of the heart. And maybe when our students will remember us or be grateful for us, then it's up to them. But it's also heart fulfilling, heart satisfying, if our students will recognize us that they have learned more than just knowledge, but that they are also loved by us. Okay, last point. The danger of this way of relating with our student is that we may overemphasize the relating part. Yung emotional relationships na lang. At the expense of teaching them what they are supposed to learn from us. Yun naman ang problema. For example, there's always a tendency in our postmodern world, with its ideological and philosophical perspectives, to overemphasize one at the expense of the other. For example, I'll give you an example, and I think we can discuss this in our later lessons. The saying that values are caught. It has always been inculcated in the minds of our parents, in the minds of our students, that values are caught. That's why we have to, you have to show good manners ourselves, or show compassion, show love, etc., or whatever those words meant to each one of us, because values are caught. Okay, no arguments about it. Kung ano nakikita ng mga bata sa mga matatanda ay nagiging tama sa mata ng bata, as we say that in our own Filipino, what do you call that? Is it Filipino saying, or whatever you call that? But this is something that is missing. And what is missing? Values are caught is only one half of the story. The other half of the story is that values are also taught. You cannot just caught it without being taught how to catch it. So, values are caught, correct, but only one half. Because values are not only caught, they are also taught. So, my dear friends, I think that is something that we have to understand. We relate with our students in a manner that teaches them knowledge, transmission of knowledge. And Augustine, I think, did that. But at the same time, he also strikes friendship. Now, it is for us to balance these two roles of teacher and friends. Thank you.